Good evening, YouTube friends and family. How are you guys doing? Hope everyone is well, healthy, safe, and warm. Just got myself pulled over. Pulled into a Love's and parking was jam-packed. Ended up spotting a little parking across the street next to a Mexican food restaurant. Damn. I gave in to temptation, went in there, and I am stuffed. Best $11 I've spent in a while. Anyway, yeah, and they actually have parking right behind it. $10 for the night. Love's was overflowing. There was already people making their own parking, and I went in there. It took me 20 minutes to get out just because none of the trucks could move. That's the thing drivers need to keep in mind. When you make your own parking, you're making it where other drivers can't get in and out of their stall. And when they try to back in and it takes them half an hour, everyone is stuck. Anyway, someone just needed to go knock on that Hotshotter's door and say, you can't park here, you need to move. Whatever, rant over. So I am gonna attempt, we'll see if I can pull it off. I'm gonna attempt to give my own opinion on an accident. If you guys are familiar with Hotshot Dave, he had his camera rolling when he jackknifed his truck some time ago. It was a braking incident. He initiated a braking event, and what I believe happened is it turned from a light braking event to a heavier braking event, and his setup for that combination of vehicle, truck, and trailer, I believe is incorrect. And, let me start by saying that this isn't one of those YouTube videos where I'm trying to call him out and call him names or anything like that. I've had some interactions with Dave. We've had conversations on the phone. Dave's a cool guy. He's a hard worker. He's a hustler. Some people criticize, that he can't make up his mind because he keeps changing his business model. It's called learning. I've told plenty of hotshotters, and in fact, I have a video that explains why semi trucks are better for hotshotting than pickup trucks. This is going to be the one case where having a semi truck worked against Dave's favor, but only because he didn't use the correct technology. And I'm assuming, I don't know the full setup of his truck. I'm gonna put this out there, and if Dave comes to my channel and says, no, Miguel, you're wrong, this is what I have, then I'm wrong. But what I am going to assume is that he has a non-proportioning electric brake controller that does not read either an electric signal directly from a proportioning circuit in his brake pedal, or it does not receive air pressure directly into the brake sending unit. In other words, the little electric unit that you mount under your dash to control your trailer brakes. There are multiple types, and my personal experience, let's start with that. I had a FLD 120, a 97, just like Dave's, and I used it for an equipment rental business. I am gonna attempt to insert a picture of it right here. Anyways, if I did that correctly, you guys should have seen old 506. 506 was a 97 FLD 120, I believe the same exact year as what Dave is running. And the way we used that truck was we had a 48-foot trailer. You should be able to see it in the picture. And obviously that's a full-blown semi, all air brake, hydraulic dovetail. Trailer had ABS, tractor did not, okay? But it's all air. I also had a 35-foot gooseneck big techs that I would tow behind a diesel-powered pickup truck. We had a few of them. But occasionally where the piece of equipment was a little too big for the pickup truck, remember back in back in those days, pickup trucks did not have the tow capacities that they do now. And so on occasion when the piece of equipment was just a little too big for a pickup truck, but the trailer had the capacity, and I needed to go somewhere small where the 48-footer just wasn't going to work, I would take a gooseneck and put it behind the rig. We went ahead and installed a brake sending unit. However, we used the inertia type. And so I'm going to try and give a quick description here, but what the inertia type does is you tie an electric circuit to your brake lights, and so when you first hit the brake pedal, that activates it, and it sends kind of a spike of power to the brakes, and then how much braking power you get from that point forward is relative to a sensor within that brake controller. It has like an inertia sensor, and it senses how much your vehicle is slowing down, and it either ramps up or ramps down your current to the brakes. And so what I'm going to say happened here to Dave is traffic starts to slow down. He gets out of the throttle. Maybe he had his jakes going, maybe not. In fact, I should probably watch the video again before I give my little analogy. Let me insert the video. It'll kind of play through. Hopefully I do that correctly also. And then I'll kind of give my description of what I believe happened to Dave. The thank God moment is he did not hit that lady going the other way. He did not get hurt. Truck's totaled, but there's insurance for that. He walked away from it, and you know, it's a learning experience. And I'm gonna say, before anyone says, "Oh, Miguel, you're picking on Dave," and you know, you don't know what it's like unless you put yourself in that position. I lived that moment, but a little different. My setup with my FLD 120, which had a shorter wheelbase than Dave's, because I did not have a sleeper on it. You saw it in the picture. It was a day cab. My experience was in the rain, empty, going downhill on an off-ramp. The light was green, it turned yellow, and it turned red. And so as I started to hit the brakes, I realized, you know, I came to the realization I should have probably just taken the yellow light, and stopping was going to be more of a event than I thought. And so I rolled the pedal on a little harder, not a stab. I just applied more pressure. You know, I've been driving trucks a long time, and so I'm not one of those people that'll slam on the brakes and everything comes flying out of the back of the truck. I know how air brakes work. I have a lot of experience with it. But in this case, it was a mistake. And as I show you Dave's video, you'll understand why with my explanation. But anyways, I didn't jackknife, but I ended up in 2 lanes, truck's tail end over in the other lane, the front of my truck in my original lane, and the trailer tail in the original lane. Had I been going a little bit faster, I would have been in the same condition as Dave ended up in. So I am not by any means saying, Dave, if it would have been me driving, I'm not saying that, because I lived the same experience. It didn't happen to me again because I learned from it. Unfortunately for Dave, he didn't get a second chance. It bit him, and it could have bit me, and it could bite anyone. After I show the video, I'll kind of explain what I think is the fix.
Concave roads. I don't know why Pennsylvania doesn't do that, but they don't. So now we're going over this hill.
One of the things to keep in mind, guys, is
we are looking at this through the eyes of a camera. In some cases, a camera has better visibility than we do. In some cases, not. So don't judge based on what you see through the camera. It's very possible Dave's visibility was not as good. Cameras have, built-in filters, different refresh rates, so on and so on. I've had it where, one of our onboard cameras on one of our trucks records something, and I look at it later, and it doesn't have the same appearance that it did as a driver. So don't judge based on what you think, and let's go. What you're seeing is, it may not be what Dave saw at the moment.
And this is where, this is where it happens. So now you see we're coming up, they're slowing down. But now, if you look right now, you cannot see, like my visibility was gone so much, you cannot see really lights in front of that car that's in front of me. Now I'm off of the fuel, I'm on the brakes, and I'm starting to slow down, and I'm hitting the brakes, and it's just sliding, because now I can see them in front of them. And now I'm still pumping, and at this point right here is where I slam on the brakes and thinking it's going to stop, and it just slides out of control. You see there's a trash truck, and now let's go back to that a minute. Let's go back 1 second. Now if you see, there's the trash truck. Now look how close. Look at that right there. That is what I'm talking about didn't happen. Like, I'm just so grateful that I did not hit and harm that lady. I'm sure I shook her up, and she left, she didn't, nobody waited and stopped in this situation. So,
Okay, so the video's pretty intense, right? And I moved away from it because I'm kind of long-winded, and it's emotional, and it's very easy to get caught up and going in a big old circle about this. So let me just say, had someone died, had someone got hurt, had there been any other property damage than Dave's, the police would have gotten involved. They would have called out either state police, highway patrol, DOT, whatever you want to call it. And had someone got hurt, they would have impounded Dave's truck and inspected it top to bottom. They'd have gone through everything. The attorneys and insurance companies would have sent out accident scene recreators. You've seen them on the side of the road. You probably just thought they were surveyors, but if you ever drive by and see a couple people that don't look like construction workers, and you see big old scars in the roadway, splats of oil, stuff like that, there was probably a fatal there, and these guys are recreating an accident. Anyway, what they would have determined from looking at this video is Dave's fault. And again, I'm not knocking the man. And they would have said driving too fast for the conditions, and speed is the major contributing factor. Now, was Dave actually driving too fast? Maybe not for a properly equipped vehicle. By properly, I'll kind of get into that. Too fast for the conditions. I'm sure in the rig he's driving now, he would have stopped and everything would have been fine, because he has all air brakes, and everything is from your foot pedal proportioned correctly, so that if you stab the brakes, everything will stop in a straight line. They're designed to do this, okay? That's the advantage to big rigs. Their systems are designed to stop in a hard braking condition and stay straight. So law enforcement would have said this: excessive speed, unsafe speed for the conditions. That's what they always say. I have had training where I went to a class that the California Highway Patrol put on, and accident investigation was one of them. And what they tell us is it's Einstein. Believe it or not, it's Einstein. So the force of an impact is equal to the velocity of an object multiplied by its speed squared. The force of an impact is equal to the velocity times, velocity times mass squared. And so when you take your velocity, you multiply that by your mass. You can't avoid if you're a 4,000 pound car or an 80,000 pound rig. You're driving what you're driving. So the force of the impact is equal to the mass of your vehicle times its velocity squared. So take your velocity and you multiply it by itself. That's an incredible, it's an incredible number. It really is. So, okay, law enforcement's always gonna say speed. There's no getting around it. And if you guys are driving, you need to understand when you look down at that speedo and you're like, hey, I'm just 6 over the limit, they're not gonna mess with me. If any of you have seen my videos, or even like when I video screen record, the other day I did a little one and I kind of explained I usually run a little under the limit. That's why. You get into a bad wreck, they're gonna figure out how fast you were going. In fact, newer vehicles have onboard event recorders. Remember that. Onboard event recorders. If you get into a massive wreck, they will impound your vehicle, the state will, but after that, before you get your hands back on your vehicle, you'll receive a letter from whoever you crashed into, and they will tell you, you cannot move that vehicle until we come and inspect it. What they're gonna do is they're gonna bring a device. It's not quite like what the dealers have to access your ECM. They're gonna access a different computer on board, a PCM, I believe they call it. And that unit will have recorded it. The truck has sensors. It's gonna know it was in a wreck, and it's gonna save 45 seconds prior to that wreck. It's gonna save, depending on your vehicle, throttle position, the gear you were in, the speed you were traveling at, brake position, in some vehicles even steering wheel position, and they're gonna use that against you. So getting back to Dave, Dave's truck's older. Had someone gotten hurt, 97s. Actually, he says in the video it's a 96. So his truck is 1 year older than the one I had. So here's what created Dave's condition. Too much rubber on the ground for the weight. Now, what I learned from my little mishap was to slide the fifth wheel all the way back. That way, none of that weight is transferring forward to the steer axle, and it's all kind of creating leverage against the back. That helps. In fact, if you've ever seen like an RV toter, basically someone took a semi truck and converted it to haul an RV, they put the pin or the fifth wheel behind the axle. This creates a little bit more of a teeter-totter, and it forces that weight down on that rear axle. The other thing is you rarely see those things with tandem drive axles. Same reason. The point of friction against the ground drops from 8 wheels to 4, and so your concentrated load factor per square inch increases on each tire. So now you apply more braking force, you have more friction. This would have helped Dave if he'd have had one less axle. That would have helped his truck not locked up and stayed straight. Obviously, if the truck was newer and it would have had ABS, that would have helped. ABS in a semi-truck does not work like ABS in your car. There is not an ABS module that will pulsate that brake and let it start spinning Basically what an ABS does is it releases pressure from one wheel, and then like David said, he stabbed the brakes again, and he stabbed them again, and he stabbed them again. That's kind of how ABS works on older semi-trucks. I believe the newer ones with disc brakes are different. I think those actually could modulate because they're disc and they react quicker. You have to think about the diaphragm, then it pushes on the S-cam through that long shaft. Those won't modulate the same way if you sit there and try and pump air through them. You know, in other words, if you try to pump and modulate the pressure, it won't do the same thing. So, okay. So, the brake sending unit is one of the biggest culprits here in Dave's condition. If he has the kind that works on inertia, it set him up for this failure. The correct way to set these trucks up, especially for rainy condition, would be to run one that either runs an air line off of your brake pedal, so when you hit your brake, it literally sends air to the brake sending unit, and that pushes the little handle that we can pull on. It basically moves it back and forth. That's what you need for these setups. If you run the inertia one, you have to have one that connects to your brake pedal and has proportioning. In other words, there's a sensor in your brake pedal that tells it you're applying 10% brake, 8% brake, 30% brake, back down to 8% brake, and now you're up to 55% brake, and it would modulate the trailer. That's what Dave was missing in this case. In my opinion, what happened is, as he tried to brake harder and his wheels locked up, at that point his inertia was no longer enough to convince the brake sending unit that he was still trying to stop. And so it quit sending as much brake energy, we'll just call it that, brake force, to his trailer in order to keep it straight. Now, someone like me, with as long as I've been driving, and I've had some not so great experiences, there's a trolley valve on the dash. Some have it next to the steering wheel. I'll show you guys. Mine is right here. So literally I have my hand here. I can, just like this, pull it. If Dave could have done this just a little, he might have stayed straight. Anyway. All right, so getting back to it. How do you keep that from happening? If you are Dave or someone like Dave and you're rolling a Class 8 truck and this is how you want to do your thing, the first thing you need to understand is where the weight sits on your chassis is important to how your vehicle dynamics are going to affect the conditions that you're in. My little mishap taught me to, from that point forward, slide my fifth wheel back. In my case, because we were running local service, I just wouldn't run the thing in the rain anymore. That simple. You know, I mean, if someone needed something moved, hey, it's raining, I'm not sending my trucks out. No big deal. You know, when you're over the road, it's a little bit different because you're going to keep running. You know, I've had rain and snow over the last couple of weeks. I haven't stopped. So if I had Dave set up, I think he wanted a 3-axle for a reason. I think he was going to do something else with it anyways. But if I were going to run that particular trailer, believe it or not, safer, especially in the rain, a 2-axle truck instead of a 3 is better. You will have more of a concentrated load factor on each tire, so your weight per square inch on each tire contact patch goes up, and so you can put more braking force to that tire and still stop. Dave's was just way too low. Add water, in other words, a friction modifier, a friction degrader, and you have a problem. So add to that, Dave's truck probably did not have ABS. In fact, back in the olden days, guys, I learned how to drive in a 1977 white Freightliner. Before we had automatic slack adjusters and before we had ABS, the way we would help this a little bit, because running a truck back in those days with no trailer on it, running at bobtail, was downright dangerous. In fact, you won't believe me, but back in the 70s, it was not a requirement to have brakes on your steer axle. A lot of older semi trucks did not have brakes on the steer axle. Only drives and the trailers. And you're gonna say I'm crazy. I drove one that was set up that way. Never got a ticket. That's the way they came from the factory. But what we would do is, when you would go to adjust your brakes, anyone that's ever done a brake adjustment before, you know, you take, if I remember right, it's a 5/8 box. And so what you have is you have a nut, and then there's a part that slides over it that keeps the nut from spinning. So you would take your 5/8, set it over, and then you would tap it with the hammer to push that lock in. You would spin the nut until your brakes made full contact, then you would back it off a half turn. And so what we would do to help create our own version of anti-locking brakes, or really all it did was it made friction come at different time, we would back off the trailer a quarter turn, back off the drives a half turn, and then back off the steers a quarter turn. So your steers rarely lock up because they benefit from the engine sitting over it. That's what saved Dave and everyone else's life that day. His steers did not lock up. Imagine if his steers would have locked up, he would have plowed into the back of that first car. It would have hit the car in front of it. One of those vehicles would have ended up going across the roadway, guaranteed, because it's almost like you're bowling at that point, and someone would have died. If not died, someone would have been severely injured. And I can tell you, it probably would have ended Dave's driving career, not just because of the lawsuits, but psychologically, Dave probably wouldn't want to drive anymore. And I tell you this because I know people that have lived that. So, getting back to how I would set this up. Sorry, I went on a tangent. It's kind of an emotional thing. I've been through some serious trucking things, and maybe I'll share that in another video. Even now, it's still kind of a struggle for me. And so the better setup for what Dave was doing with that 5-car trailer is a 2-axle tractor, single drive axle. At that point, you have to weigh it when it's fully loaded and make sure it's the right capacity. And at that point, you decide if you need to slide the 5th wheel forward of the axle, or if you need to slide it over the center or a little bit back. If you're not coming anywhere near its maximum, when you're empty in particular, putting it a little bit rear of the axle helps you with braking friction. So that would be the first thing, a 2-axle truck instead of 3. The second thing would be the type of brake unit. You want to get either, if it's a newer truck and it has an electronic proportional, I'm gonna call it a switch, but it's not a switch. Most of our brake pedals have like an on and off switch for your brake lights. Some actually have a proportioning setup where it actually knows how much percentage-wise you're applying. It's very much like your throttle. You know, yeah, I think my camera's trying to tell me I'm too long-winded. It keeps pausing out on its own. So I was saying, your throttle has like a dial, is an easy way to put it, and it knows how much percentage-wise you're applying. The same thing applies to some brake pedals. If you don't have that, then you need one that takes direct air after your brake pedal and sends it to the brake unit, so then it knows by pressure how much you want. Unfortunately, anytime you're, electric or electric over hydraulic, it's just not going to be the same as all air. It's not going to react the same. But that would have been my next move, or that would be my next item to make that setup more rain ready. Now, I can tell you, if Dave were to hook up to that trailer again and go drive in the rain, knowing what he knows now, he would have started braking much sooner, and he probably would have been driving slower. It's what I did with my setup after I had my experience, and that included, I figured out slide the fifth wheel all the way to the back, everything else. You become more proactive in your following distance and in your speed. Those are the two major conditions here, right? And he had good following distance in the beginning of the video. You could see the vehicle was way ahead of him. And so I'm not saying he was reckless. Had he known his truck had this characteristic, I'm pretty sure he would have been off the throttle pretty much when he crested the hill. He would have been like, holy cow, these cars are close already. But, he's hit the brakes before under dry conditions. I'm sure he's hit the brakes before with the setup loaded, and he felt like he's got plenty of braking power. In fact, in one of his videos, he even said, I may never go back to a pickup truck. This is safer. It's got, the engine braking, which is huge. Plus it's got, way more brake than he's ever going to need. In this case, he had too much, and the balance of the weight was working to his disadvantage. And so again, I'm going to say it, I'm not knocking him or his driving skill. Thank the man upstairs, no one got hurt, and Dave walked away from this business intact, life intact, because that could be a business ender right there. If you only have your $1 million commercial auto, the attorneys that come after trucking companies don't know a $1 million lawsuit. If they're going to get involved, they're going to get involved for a lot of money, because they're going to get a percentage of it. Anyway, I hope I didn't make this video negative. And if Dave ever watches it, I hope Dave realizes there's no disrespect there. I'm just trying to share with other people, if you're considering, and I'm a proponent of towing these smaller trailers with the semi truck, but you do need to set it up correctly. You do need the right brake sending unit. And I made the mistake of using the wrong one myself, and I probably don't have the shorts anymore, but I can tell you, you need to get washed after that. Anyway, I hope this is informative and helpful to those of you that are considering a Class 8 truck with a smaller electric brake trailer, even if it's a slightly bigger one. They put 16,000 pound axles on these things now, and you can get them with 3 16,000 pound axles, but they're still electric. And so if you're considering this, understand it does not work the same as it does in a semi truck. And this is kind of why some of us semi truck drivers, we operate a little bit different. Man, I really don't know why my video keeps turning off. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up because it's a whole bunch of little snips and pieces I got to put together. I hope I edit this thing correctly and it's not out of order. Anyways, thanks for watching, everyone.